Monsieur Anber.
Monsieur Cassava. How are
Hey,
you, brother?
We're back by popular demand, or at least we would think, we hope. Thank you for tuning in. This is Calling Russ Anber, episode 2. We're still working out some of the technological kinks. Russ, a bit more blurry tonight. Hopefully the internet stays afloat for the rest of the show. And I look forward to going through a few topics, some updates with Fury Wilder, the Devin Haney who fought this past weekend. We have the Terrence Crawford fight coming up. So a lot of good stuff. How are you doing, Mr. Anber?
Good, and I've got my 17 shirt on. I don't know if you can see my Usyk shirt. My buddy Usyk, yeah.
And when you say 17, what's the 17 for?
17 is actually his birthday. His birthday is the 17th, so his logo, if you will, or his branding is Usyk 17 because 17 is his birthday. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the same day as Muhammad Ali. He shares the same birthday with Muhammad Ali. So that's why he uses it in all his branding. I don't know if it's anywhere else, maybe on the back, but it's Usyk 17 is the logo. And that's all these little all this number is made up. I don't know if you can see it, is made up of the name Usyk all along to create these. So he's a good guy. You know, I love working with him. You know, I think doing things right, I think he could shock the world in the heavyweight division and prove maybe that we might not need the new division that the boxers that WBC is talking about. But we can catch up on that later.
Yeah, if we have time, there's a bit of the final flurries towards the end of the show, and also we want to approach the subject of Katie Taylor, one of the best fighters in the women division, in the women's category, pound for pound. She has a big fight. We'll get to all of that, but first and foremost, speaking of pound for pound, we had Canelo Alvarez. He's in the news, free agent. Looks like he's in negotiations to come back and have a fight by the end of this year, sometime in December. And the name that we've been hearing at the time of this recording, and the front runner, it seems, for the fight is Callum Smith, somebody you know extremely well, of course, working the corner for Callum Smith as a cut man. I don't want you to get into the negotiations of the bout, but let's say it were to happen, that fight, and Canelo now, who's been inactive since his big win against Sergey Kovalev almost a year ago. What do you think of the prospect of that fight and how much of a challenge for Canelo Callum Smith presents?
First of all, I should be the one doing this interview and asking you, because you're better at me than telling me what the details are of the split up and, you know, Golden Boy falling apart, the contract, letting him out. First they go to court, then they release him. I mean, there must be some intriguing stuff that's gone on in this that I'm not privy to. Like, I haven't been on the phones. I haven't been asking anybody. I will make my usual phone calls and talk to the people, but I don't really know what the behind the scenes stuff is, other than the obvious, which we knew that him and the Reynosos were not happy with Golden Boy, and it's been a while. And I think that's also been expressed with Ryan Garcia as well. You know, like he's not happy in that marriage, that Golden Boy marriage doesn't seem to be happy. But I don't know the details about that. So I always ask you when, you know, I cheat and ask you. You're my source of information when it comes to these kind of things. But as for the fight, however, I learned of this a few weeks ago, actually. I got a message from Joe Gallagher, who trains Callum, and asked me, what am I doing? And he said, are you available on the 19th of December? I said, maybe. Why? He said, I can't tell you why. He says, but keep the date open. I said, okay. Now, at that time, the Better BF's fight still hadn't been canceled. The Mick Conlan fight still hadn't been canceled. So I was going to be on the road, basically nonstop, going Vegas for 2 fights, including Loma, Usyk in London, Roy Jones in Los Angeles, Mick Conlan in London, Better BF in Moscow, and then wherever on the 19th. 2 of those fights unfortunately fell through, as we know. Conlan is out with a torn ankle, and Better BF's fight has been postponed till January. So that's out. Fast forward ahead to the 19th. Now I see these things coming up. Callum Smith has been in the running for a while. So let's hope. And as far as I know, he's been preparing, you know, as if the fight is going to happen. So I think that's a good thing, you know, like he's getting ready. So if the call does come, because right now, let's face it, we're on short notice. You know, Callum's on short notice. Even if they confirm it, it's on short notice because let's face it, you're 5 weeks out from the fight. Figure he comes to America, a week, 10 days before the fight, as you have to do fight week and deal with jet lag and whatnot. There's not a lot of time left. So apparently he's been preparing. So God bless him. If he could get this fight, you always want to fight a guy that you can make your money with. Now, I agree that probably the money isn't going to be as good now because of COVID, but let's face it, Canelo is still the biggest payday out there, and you have to take those fights. You can't let that go to the side because a great performance, a world-class performance, a war, a nip and tuck fight, anything except, a blowout is good for your career. You can't turn that down. So I think it's a great fight for him to take, and it's a fight that he's wanted for a long time, and I'm happy for it. I hope it goes his way.
And look, and Callum Smith is in the same situation as Canelo in terms of inactivity. He hasn't fought since the John Ryder fight last November. Tough game, John Ryder went to the decision, but he's an undefeated young guy, Smith. And the challenges he could present to Canelo, I have to give credit. If Canelo's taking this fight, probably he's going to get super middleweight, but Canelo went up to light heavyweight to fight a Sergey Kovalev, who many will say is past his prime. I mean, this is a bit of a risk for Canelo as well. Callum Smith presents some challenges, I would think, style-wise for Canelo.
I'll tell you what, I'll defy you to name me somebody who could be in the super middleweight division. I defy you to name me somebody who could be more dangerous. Maybe you could name somebody as dangerous, but more dangerous than Callum Smith. I don't think this is a case of Canelo cherry picking, that's for sure.
And one thing about Canelo that I always thought was interesting, Russ, is that when he came onto the stage, of course, very young, 15 years old professional, the top rank, not top rank, but a golden boy, took their time with Canelo, so in the development stages at one point, fought some big fights with the Jim Kirkland days and was winning big fights by knockout. But prior to the Gennady Golovkin fight, the first fight against Gennady Golovkin in 2017, you were kind of a bit of skeptical with Canelo, the way he had fought against Mayweather in his younger days, and you weren't entirely sure. I remember at one point you were saying to me, let's see, I'm still not entirely sure. And then after the first Golovkin fight that many thought Golovkin won and ended up being a disputed draw, you said one of that was maybe the fight that you saw something in Canelo, despite the result that was most likely a loss. Officially, that's when you said, you know what, there's something here. He's not your typical style of fighter, but you thought he was really arriving towards the elite stage before even he won the rematch, which a lot of people then say that was his best performance against Golovkin. But even after the first Golovkin fight, I remember you said to me, you know what, Canelo might be the real deal here.
You know what, I agree with you. And I remember early in his career, I thought, wow, is this guy a hype job? Are they getting overly excited about this guy? And, you hear everybody come out, oh yeah, this guy's, I got the next great prospect, and you're watching him. And, I'm always skeptical about that. I'm always skeptical when guys come in with a big fanfare, say, okay, now you're talking big. Not that he's the talker. I'm just saying they're talking about him big. Let's see what he is. And when he took the Mayweather fight, I said, okay, that's it. They're just cashing in on the payday. That's it. Stayed very safety first. Didn't really try to win. Went in there. And then when you look back on it, you know what? They probably did a smart thing. Like, this was his chance to be in the big limelight, get him the experience he needed. And I thought, you know what? This is good. And he started to evolve. And as he started to evolve, he started to become a complete fighter. Before he was just like kind of a guy who you looked like wanted to be a puncher, wanted to take it to you, bang you out. And he started to evolve, and I started to see things in the Miguel Cotto fight. I started to see stuff. Well, this guy's like kind of becoming a defensive whiz, like he's hard to hit. You can't judge him. He comes back quick. He's fast. There was a lot of things that I was starting to see of how he became complete. And he started to remind me, not in terms of style, but in terms of completeness, the way Andre Ward used to be. That if Andre needed to go inside, you could go inside. If Andre had to box you from the outside, he boxed you from the outside. And don't look at me like you disagree, because that's a very good analogy, I think.
Well, no, but Canelo is still a bit more of he presents a more challenging power dynamic than Andre Ward did. Andre Ward, you knew it was most likely going to be ending in a scorecard. Canelo has that one-punch power especially
Yeah,
whether
but
it's body and in the lately.
he was complete. He was complete. He could block punches. He could slip punches. He could fight you on the inside. He could fight you on the outside. And that's what I'm starting to see in Canelo. The fact that Canelo possesses more power, than Andre Ward might have possessed, pound for pound. I think his completeness is very similar. Like, there's not a lot. I seriously believe that you can make a claim as Canelo being among the best pound for pound fighters in boxing today, because me and you have had this discussion before. Okay, we talked about, people say, pound for pound, he didn't fight anybody. Okay, it's not relevant to who you fought, to a degree. It's how you fight. It's how you fight. It's your abilities in the ring. And if you take all the components that make up greatness in a fighter, that make up a complete fighter, he's starting to be very good at a lot of those categories. Inside, outside, body punching, power punching, left hook, right hands, jabs, defense. There's a lot of footwork, balance. There's a lot of things. And I think, to me, the revelation moment when I said, he's got him, was I believe it was round 3 in the first Golovkin fight. For 2 or 3 rounds, Golovkin is chasing him around the ring like a cat chasing a mouse. Like, he's on him. All of a sudden, Canelo stopped on the ropes, not in the center of the ring, on the ropes, and said, come on. And he stood there, and Gennady froze. Boom, he froze him right there. I said, this guy's got him on the end of a string. You just chased the guy for 3 rounds. He stopped now and said, come on. So he did what you want. He stopped, and he froze you. I said, this guy knows what he's doing. And my estimation for him in that one move, boom, elevated. I'm a fan now. I'm a real fan of his abilities and him as a fighter.
You bringing up the first Golovkin fight, what was interesting is that even though Canelo in that 3rd round at that moment kind of wanted to engage, the rest of the fight, Golovkin still chased him for most part. A lot of exchanges towards the ropes. Canelo liked to back up on the ropes. And the rematch, that's where you really saw Canelo stand his ground much more against Golovkin and end up being a heck of a fight. So let me ask you then, you talk about how much you're a fan of his. If you were trying to strategize a game plan, let's say it's not even Callum Smith, anybody else, you go to the tape and you say, how do we defeat Canelo Alvarez right now, a man who seems to have very little flaws? What's the strategy behind you as the coach? How would you go about saying, this is how we defeat Canelo Alvarez?
First of all, you need the pony, right? You come up with any strategy you want, but you need the horse, okay? So providing you had the horse, I think the key in all of this is you have to have a left jab. You have to have a left jab and a dominating left jab. It has to be able to be strong enough to back him up when you want to back him up. You can't let him build that momentum coming forward and you're backpedaling the whole night. That's not good. You have to be Ali or Leonard or Ray Robinson to be able to do that, for 12 rounds of the fight. So you have to be able at some point when you pop him on that jab and you hit him, boom, 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 and drive him back even more on a second attack. Then you can go back to boxing again. You need that jab. You also need to have great defense. I think one of the guys that might have laid out a little bit of a blueprint his name escapes me now. The kid he fought at Madison Square Garden. He ended up winning a split decision, but he knocked him down. And I think that's what kind of. I'm sorry?
You're talking about Lara now? Lara?
Not Lara. The American kid. Why does his name escape me now? It was right on the tip of my tongue when I was about to tell you the story, and I lost it.
Okay, so you're talking a way back then. If you mean Canelo losing or winning a split decision against an American, Austin Trout?
Austin Trout.
It actually was a unanimous decision, but
Sorry.
it wasn't.
Okay. But Austin, because he was able to slip shots, make him, I was thinking Texas. I said, I know it's Texas. Has something to do with Texas. Austin is in Texas, yeah. So, he was boxing him. He was driving him back. He could make him miss. That was key. That was key in the fight. You have to be able to make Alvarez miss his best punches. That's something Kovalev, you saw, kind of had the plan. Buddy had the same plan for Kovalev. The thing is, Kovalev's not a defensive whiz. Kovalev's not the guy that's going to slip and counter, roll, bang, counter. He's not going to do that. Mayweather was able to do that. So if you take away that power, if you take away that capacity to be able to hit you when he wants, you're on your way to a big win. Easier said than done, of course, but that's why I say you need the pony.
Okay, so previously, a few minutes ago, you talked about him maybe being the best fighter pound for pound. Now, on some people's list, he already is. Now, it's a bit more contested at the moment since the Lomachenko loss, I would believe, because Lomachenko deserved to be the pound for pound #1 fighter. Even some people thought Canelo already was a #1 even prior to the Lopez fight. But if you look at the different lists, there's one man, Canelo, who's mostly identified as the best fighter pound for pound right now. And then there's Bud Crawford, Terrence Crawford, who's also fighting this upcoming Saturday against Kell Brook. An interesting fight. Kell Brook brings a name, hasn't had the same type of results the last few years, of course, as when he did in his prime of his career. Somebody who also faced Gennady Golovkin. But if you had to, let's say Bud Crawford, first of all, that fight against Kell Brook, your thoughts, but also the pound for pound landscape right now, because Loma lost to Lopez, you can't put Lopez right away #1, I wouldn't think. He still has some things to prove. But where do you stack? Do you think Canelo is the best fighter pound for pound? Do you think Bud Crawford is? And what do you think of the Bud Crawford fight?
Let's put the Kell Brook fight aside for now, because I think you summed it up. Brook, it's an interesting fight because of the name that Brook has. Brook has always given tough fights to everybody he fought, even Golovkin. He shook. I remember I was in LA watching the fight on TV. We were at a fight out there, and I remember watching it, and I said, "Oh my God!" He shook Golovkin to the core, and he was a welterweight. So don't think that you're going to be in an easy fight. How far removed from his best he is left to be seen. We'll find out on Saturday night. Crawford is right in the middle of his best. So let's leave that fight right there, because that's going to have food for thought, and we'll be able to talk about that on the next fight. We're all going to be intrigued because we know what Kell Brook brings, but we also want to see how good Crawford is and what he's going to bring as well, and how impressive his performance is going to be. And I do consider Crawford as one of the best fighters pound for pound in the world. Now, if you look at who I consider, Canelo, Crawford, Loma, you take those guys, and there isn't much that you can name in boxing that these guys can't do. There isn't much. Loma, probably his weakest game might be the inside game as we know it from a North American standpoint, but he has a different type of an inside game. But the quality of punches, the balance, the speed, the execution, the angles, the defense, the heart, and anything you want to name, these guys have it all. That's what it means when you say pound for pound. It doesn't matter that Loma lost to Teofimo Lopez. Loma lost because eventually when you keep pushing that envelope and you handicap the other fighter, or handicap yourself, I should say, and give an advantage or an edge to your opponent all the time, it's like giving away rounds and you're playing catch up. And, Lopez is an incredibly dangerous fighter, gifted fighter. He believes in himself. He's confident. He can punch. These eventually get too much to be able to battle against. It becomes too difficult to do. That doesn't take away from the fact that because he lost to a guy in a weight class that's not his weight at all, not only is it not his weight class, but against a kid who really, this guy walks around at 60, lost to a big guy, doesn't take away from the fact that he's not one of the most gifted fighters in boxing today. Come on, if you just say that because he suffered a loss, that's insanity. You know what I mean? It was a close fight and he's injured.
We're going on a tangent on Loma here for a second. I understand your point. He's still one of the top 10 fighters pound for pound regardless of the loss. But let's say you don't want to make a distinction between Canelo and Crawford. You have those fighters in the top 3. I think you have to have Naona Inoue, the monster, of course, even if it's a lower weight classes, he's up there as well.
But I don't yet agree with that yet, but I'll tell you why later. Go on.
Okay. So argue that point, but also I want to have the pound for pound history of it. I think it's interesting because some people think it's an overrated, it's a mythical list, but casual fans sometimes are confused thinking this is an actual official ranking by somebody. It isn't. It's subjective. We've known over the eras and the different decades. You had Roy Jones as the best pound for pound, Mayweather for many years, Pacquiao, etc. But where does the pound for pound list come from? I always like these little historical nuggets because of the veteran you are in the game. You know a bit of that, of course.
You called me old, didn't you? You just called me old.
In a polite way. So explain maybe for people who are not entirely sure, your opinion on the pound for pound list, where it came from originally, and then Inoue, you're saying you're not agreeing that he's maybe in the top 5 right now.
Let me address Inoue first, because we have not seen everything yet from Inoue. Pound for pound, there's no doubt he's one of the biggest punchers in boxing today. That's a fact. You can't take that away from him, okay? So we've established that. When you say best pound for pound fighter, however, Mike Tyson, as dominant as he was, never made a pound for pound list, because his game was based on aggression and on power. That's what he did. And that's okay. You know, like he was supposed to win in the heavyweight division and blast guys out of there. You know, no one ever said, oh, Mike Tyson's the best fighter pound for pound. No one said that. You know, Jones was the best fighter.
Because the pound for pound list, some people think should not even include any heavyweights, because the point is that, of course, heavyweights are going to be better than the other weights based on weight and power. And the pound for pound list should be included to see if all fighters were at the heavyweight limit or at the same weight, who would be the best. Is it, no, you don't agree with that?
It's at any weight. If you put the fighter at any weight, so it doesn't matter. So if you could have taken Ali at the time, you know, and say, is he the best pound for pound fighter in boxing? Because you could say, could he win at welterweight? You say, yeah, the way he fights, he could win at welterweight. You know, so you could have made that argument. The pound for pound. So this is why for Inoue, we're going to need to see more from Inoue before we say, is he the complete fighter the way I have categorized Canelo, Crawford, Loma. These are the kind of guys, they're complete in every aspect of the game. As a trainer, you look at everything there is to know about boxing: defense, offense, inside, outside, southpaw, right-handed, movement, balance, defense, speed, power. All those things come together to make up a pound for pound guy. And the guy who had that better than anybody, and the guy who the phrase was coined, pound for pound, was Sugar Ray Robinson. Because they looked at Robinson and said, you could put this guy in any weight class, and if he does what he can do here, he would beat anybody in any division. And that's what made him pound for pound. And again, like I said, you break this down: the jab, the speed, the power, the combinations, the footwork, the defense, the offense, anything. And that's who he was. And that's why now fans, I don't think, understand. They seem to judge it by how spectacular is the win, who have you fought, who haven't you fought, you know, if you have your 0 or don't have a 0. No, it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's irrelevant. It's how complete you are as a fighter. Roy Jones was that way. He was complete. Manny Pacquiao was complete. You know, when you said pound for pound, there's a lot of things you could have said that he does better than anybody else. Maybe not to the degree that Jones did. Mayweather, you could say the same thing. Like, there's only a few boxes that you don't tick off. You know, like, you don't consider Mayweather a huge puncher. Okay, so he's not a huge puncher, but everything else made more up for that. You know, no problem. You know, technically his stance, his balance, his positioning, his defense, the quality of his shots, the way he threw shots, the technical proficiency of all those punches. That's what makes you the best pound for pound. That's what makes you great.
All right, just final point on this, is we're only about 25 minutes into this
already
right now tonight. Quick, when do you recall ever hearing the pound for pound list? You're saying Sugar Ray Robinson that's when you can think of when they started coining that list, or the mythical list, if you will. That's
absolutely, that's where I heard it. And then I think after that, it was when Roy came along. The 10 years that Roy was king was when we were hearing pound for pound. And I think that's where things might have kind of got misinterpreted, and the meaning kind of got lost along the way, because people started associating pound for pound as it pertained to Roy, because at the time there wasn't anybody in boxing that was as dominant as he was. Forget about him not losing a fight. You were going through fight after fight. You were going through years after years of trying to find a round that he lost. That's how dominant he was, you know? And so people suddenly said, oh my God, if you're that good, you're the best pound for pound. Well, to me, it was more than that. I mean, he had speed, he had power, he had flash, he had defense, he had offense. You know, he had it all: uppercuts, hooks, right hand, body shots, head shots, name it. He did it. So I think that's where it started to come back, but it lost the meaning. And people still to today don't ever define what that means. We never define what it means to say pound for pound. And if you were to name me, if we were to name a fighter, and Pacquiao's one of them, but I'd go back a little further. If we were to name somebody that in the modern era, if you will, was a definition of pound for pound and proof that if you took him from one weight class and put him in another, Roberto Duran, came up from lightweight to become middleweight champion of the world with that style, and was able to win.
Even prior to that, Henry Armstrong, all the different categories he would go up and win championships in.
Yeah, of course, but you see, his was a style that was a whirlwind type style, and so he got away with it in those 3 weight classes that he was able to do it for a brief period of time, no doubt about it, for sure. But a different style. Duran never lost that same. He fought the same way as a middleweight as he did when he was a lightweight. And, like the way he moved, the way he threw the right hand, the way he defended, the way he blocked, the way he rolled with shots was all the same. So you could see how good his stance was, his balance, everything. And basically, like I said, you took him and you put him here and he won. That's what pound for pound means.
I agree 100%. We have a few little topics to get to here before the end. Devin Haney, quickly last weekend, wins against Gamboa, convincing win, but not a spectacular performance or a performance that is going to get people buzzing the same way Tank Davis the week prior, the way he won by knockout against Santa Cruz. Look, Haney, Davis, Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, we know those are the 4 future possible pay-per-view stars or up-and-coming talents. I think Haney, from the perspective of popularity and excitement, is below these fighters. But look, I still think he may be the best after Lopez. I know the Gamboa performance wasn't what we expected. We thought he was going to deliver a bit more. The aggression wasn't necessarily there, but technically he's going to be a very tough out, I think, against Gamboa. And look, I don't know what your impressions were overall, but Haney, to me, did well. Bit underwhelming, but I still think that he's been a little bit underrated based off, again, the excitement level not necessarily being there. But he's complete in many other areas that I look forward to seeing when he's faced against better opposition, how that will translate.
He's a good fighter, Matt. He's a good fighter. You can't take it away from him. Was it the explosive? I thought he was going to blast Gamboa out. I thought, credit to Gamboa for hanging in there, but I thought Gamboa was coming in really as a last payday to cash a check. I'm still questioning how Gamboa even gets a shot at the title. How do you get a shot? Like, it's a little bit insulting to other contenders and to fighters that coming off of a loss, you earn a shot at a title. And an injury on top of that. The injury and a loss, and you get a shot at the title. I found that a little bit strange, but more power to him. He showed that he tried in the fight, and he really came prepared, and he really wanted to win. Okay, it wasn't the scintillating performance that people were expecting. It wasn't that, oh my God, this guy's great, can you believe it? Okay, it wasn't that. That's fine. It's a young kid. Give him a chance to develop. He fought a seasoned veteran. You could see in the fight that even a veteran that, boy, in his best might have been really dangerous fight for a Devin Haney. Because don't forget, we think of Gamboa now, he's had so many problems, stuff. I think of Gamboa when I covered him in the amateurs. And this guy was a monster. He just showed up and had to make weight and he was going to win. That's how good this guy was, okay? When he turned pro, the possibility of him fighting Juan Manuel Lopez. Remember the kid from Puerto Rico? There was a boy,
Aaron quota, the infamous quota, if he would let it marinate before the fight would have happened, right? Between Gamboa and
they waited too long for that one. That should have been one that happened. But I think it's fair to say the way their careers have gone, that Gamboa, and I picked him from the beginning, would have been the heavy favorite. Now, would he have got dropped? Maybe. Would he have got back up? Guaranteed. Would he have won? I liked his chances. So, I always loved Gamboa. I really loved him as a fighter.
And somebody trained upstairs in the gym for a while. Once he came for a fight in Montreal. And I remember, yes, he trained his final week in the gym. We got to see his explosion, his work habits. He was an exciting guy, no doubt. I still remember I had to drive him to Saint-Claude de Rabillard one time. His flight got delayed. Well, he couldn't be there for training. I had to drive him to Saint-Claude de Rabillard. He made me jog with him a little bit. Didn't speak a word of English. I could barely understand his Spanish. It was fun times, but you could see the talent I think it was just that extra gear, maybe that overwhelmingly in his career, it's going to be somewhat looked at as could have been better. But now he's towards the end of it. I still think Gamboa is a fun guy, just a great talent that maybe didn't materialize in terms of success what we expected when he first turned pro.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what? I think that Gamboa, like a lot of the other Cuban stars, you have to think about why have they not become the dominant pros that they were in the amateurs? And I think a lot of that has to do with the drastic change in lifestyle and the people. This is the worst. The people who end up surrounding them and advising them outside of Cuba, where their focus was on boxing and people were watching, making sure they were doing the right things. And at the end of the day, the results were there, was not the case coming to America. Coming to America, these guys felt like they landed in Disneyland, like, this is great. I got a Mercedes. I got this. I'm on the beach in Miami, palm tree, I go wherever I want. Like, you have to understand the oppression that they were under, and I don't want to say it was jail-like, but I mean, coming out of that to freedom and doing whatever you wanted, and people are throwing money at you and you're getting contracts and you're not doing anything. Very hard to stay focused and achieve that goal. And sometimes the opposite happens with North American fighters or American fighters, in that they might not enjoy the amateur success. Teofimo Lopez, perfect example, doesn't enjoy the amateur success to the degree that the Cubans did, but parlays that into says, I'm going to make it as a pro where they're going to pay me and I'm going to be committed to it. And they become great fighters and champions and make a lot of money. So there's a difference, in where you come from geographically and how you make it work for you, and I think that's why we haven't seen that domination from the Cubans. But that said, back to Haney. Look, give the kid a break. What is he, 21, Matt? He's 21.
Very good. Wait, so right now though, Haney, Tank Davis, who would you favor quickly?
Well, you would know the instant response would be Tank, because you say, okay, he has more experience, been around longer. But no, I'm not going to say that, because there's a lot of things that affect his lifestyle and the way he trains and his habits. So I'm not going to right away say it. I think he's in a tough fight with Devin Haney. And of course, it's a tough fight for Devin Haney. It's not a walk in the park either. But on overall skill, it could be a flip 'em fight. Don't base the result of what would happen with Gervonta Davis and Devin Haney on Haney's performance against Gamboa. That wouldn't be fair. Give the guy a chance. Give the guy time to mature a little bit. Let him have the time in the seasoning that Gervonta has had.
Yeah, agreed. And that's why I hope in these coming years we're going to see Lopez, Garcia, Haney, Davis, some sort of tournament between the four. We'll get to see the best fight the best. Always, of course, a question mark in this day and age in boxing. One fighter, though, who hasn't turned down anything of the top opposition, and that will be one of the final points for tonight. Katie Taylor, undefeated. Gets a lot of attention in the UK, going to be main eventing at the Zone this weekend against Gutierrez, an undefeated female fighter. Lesser profile, maybe, of course, but Katie Taylor, one thing I know that's on your mind, and when we discussed this leading up to the fight, the 3-minute versus 2-minute rounds in boxing. Women boxing have 2 minutes, regardless of the stakes, regardless of how good these fighters are. What's your thoughts on eventually them moving to the 3-minute section of the round, as more and more of this female sports and boxing, it's present, it's there. We're going to see more and more of these fighters get an opportunity, which they deserve. Should the rounds be moved to 3 minutes?
Before I insult somebody with what I'm about to say, let me just say that Katie Taylor, to me, I think just like Usyk, just like Lomachenko, just like a Canelo, these are the people we need to represent boxing. These are the people that we need to be the heroes of the sport. These are the people that inspire. These are the people that the media wants to talk to. These are the people that are not looking at them as a train wreck, but as a legitimate athlete, as any sport they cover, as real as a person, as giving, as honorable. These are the people that we need. I love Katie Taylor. I think the way she conducts herself is, she deserves an extra belt for being the classy woman that she is, and she fights hard. She takes on everybody. I have all the respect in the world for Katie Taylor, and she doesn't want to duck anybody. Now, it's not her fault that the division is not low. I mean, she had to move up to keep getting, like a little bit like Loma, had to move up to kind of handicap because she was so dominant at the other weight class. She had to move up, you know, to make more interesting matches for herself, you know. But I think she's all class, and I don't say this about a lot of women boxers. But I think she's the epitome of what women's boxing should be. And I know that there's a lot of women out there who look at her. What's her name? Terry Harper. Terry's her name? Is it Terry Harper?
I believe so, yeah.
Is it Terry? Yeah. She said, I still get giddy, you know, and I feel like a girly fan when I have to take a picture with Katie Taylor, and she's a world champion. You know, she's a world champion herself, and she feels that, you know, a little bit larger than life feeling when you're around Katie Taylor. And I think that's because of the way she conducts herself and the class in which she displays herself. So I've got all the time in the world for Katie Taylor, and, you know, I hope she
we don't have all the time in the world for this conversation, Russell. You want to get to the 2 minutes or 3 minute rounds or what?
Okay, yes. Well, see, this is why we're going to go now, just like this. We're going to go from 2 minute to 3 minute. Okay, this is exactly what we're doing here. Matt, we don't run women's 75 meter instead of 100 meter race. Men run 100 meters, women run 100 meters. There should absolutely, women's softball, you don't play with 4 strikes and 5 balls for a bait. You 3 strikes, 3 outs. It's the same rules. It is absolute insanity from the beginning, even at a time when they said that women had to box in 10-ounce gloves. Why? Why do they have to box in 10-ounce gloves? Like, what's the logic behind that? You know, it's stupid. It doesn't make sense. You want women's boxing. The WBC has taken away the female belt and made a world champion belt. Doesn't matter if you're man or woman, want to recognize it as a world championship belt, fine. Then fight them under the same rules. It's 3 minutes. That's what professional boxing is. It's not male professional boxing. It's professional boxing. And the 2 minute rounds, I'll tell you what it's going to do. Whoever's a star now is going to become an even bigger star. And whoever's a pretender is going to be gone. And we're going to see the knockouts instead of these decisions that we're getting. Because eventually, when that last minute starts to kick in of every round, that last 60 seconds is an eternity when your lungs are on fire. Okay? And I think it's wrong that they fight 2 minutes. I think it hinders the sport instead of making. Maybe at the beginning you'll have people, it might turn into a boring fight or whatnot, but eventually as the quality of the game arises, it'll be like the men, and you're going to see real winners, real contenders, and get rid of the pretenders. These people that are able to fight for world titles, you know, with such little experience and hang in there. They hang in there because the first minute of the round, nothing much happens. They're able to run around and keep their hands up. Not much happens. Second minute, they start getting pounded, you know, right about to go, ding, the bell rings. They go back to their corner. They have a full minute's rest so they can run around for the first minute and survive, and then take a few punches in the second minute and go when that third minute is there. And I think that the best example of this is, just think about this. When you fight 2 minute rounds and you have a minute's rest, you're getting 50% rest time as ratio to the work time you have. 2 minutes work, 1 minute, that's 50%. When you change that to 33% instead of 50%, that's a hell of a difference. You're working 30% more, and you're getting 20% less rest. That's a massive difference. Bring in 3 minute rounds for women. That's it. You want to be champions? Call yourselves champions. They want it. The women want it as well. It's not just me saying this. They want it. And then they're right up there and saying, I'm a professional fighter. Because just having a license doesn't make you a professional. 3 minute rounds for the women.
Russ, I can't disagree. And I think we're probably going to see it eventually. The logic is there, and hopefully it happens. Final note, are you almost done house arrest there? Your isolation is, you're going to be able to go out of the basement in the next few days here?
Saturday is Saturday's parole date. So Saturday's, no, I should say Sunday's the official parole day. Saturday's the last day. So
just so we're clear, it's not officially house arrest, although people don't panic right away. It's of course, the 14-day quarantine period, and we'll be traveling, Russ, I believe, later in November for Roy Jones, as you talked about. It's a busy schedule in December, and we'll see what happens if Callum Smith gets Canelo. Glad you tuned in again. We'll be in touch next week, Russ, depending on wherever you are, whether it's in your basement or anywhere else. And thank you for doing this again.
I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun again. Good subjects this week, Matt.
Thanks there, Russ. I tried.
Talk to you later.